Welcome back, everyone. We're diving into Chapter 3 of Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, the Night Bus.
Mm.
And wow, this chapter, it really kicks things up a notch, doesn't it? We're thrown right into a world that feels way darker and more, well, suspenseful than what we saw in the first two books.
Absolutely. Right from the start, you get this feeling of unease, this kind of tension that hangs over everything. It's like, the calm before the storm. It definitely sets the stage for all the challenges and dangers that Harry's going to face in this book.
Yeah, totally. I was really struck by how, like, emotionally raw Harry is at the beginning of the chapter. He's just run away from the Dursleys after that whole blow-up with Aunt Marge, and he's completely alone.
He's in an incredibly vulnerable position, yeah.
Yeah.
He's broken wizarding law, he's terrified of being expelled from Hogwarts, and he's got nowhere to go. I mean, can you imagine that weight on his shoulders?
It's heavy stuff. And then just when things seem absolutely bleak, bam, the night bus shows up. What an entrance.
The night bus is more than just a wacky way to get around. I think it's a symbol of the magical world itself. It pops up to help those in need, but it also really highlights how separate the magical world is from the Muggle world.
That's a really interesting point. And then we meet Stan Shunpike, the conductor. He seems so, I don't know, carefree at first, all excited about Sirius Black's escape, like it's some big gossip. But then Voldemort's name comes up, and
Yeah, and it's like a switch flips. Suddenly all that casualness disappears, and he's
yeah.
practically trembling with fear, especially when he thinks about Azkaban. It really shows how, even years later, the fear of Voldemort and what he did still haunts the wizarding world.
It makes you think about how powerful fear is, right? How it can affect everyone, even people who try to act like it. Doesn't bother them.
Oh, absolutely. And that fear is only amplified by the way Sirius Black is described. I mean, he's not just some petty thief. He's a convicted murderer, a devoted follower of Voldemort, and someone who, it seems, enjoyed causing pain. That detail about him laughing after the murders, it's just chilling.
Yeah, that sends shivers down my spine, too. It's this stark reminder that even in a magical world, there's still real darkness. And for Harry, who thinks he might be Black's target, that darkness feels very real and very personal.
Which makes the introduction of Cornelius Fudge, the Minister of Magic, all the more interesting. His behavior is, well, kind of confusing, wouldn't you say? He brushes off Harry's accidental magic, but then insists on keeping him cooped up in Diagon Alley.
It's like he's trying to protect Harry, but at the same time, he's keeping him in the dark. And what about him refusing to sign Harry's Hogsmeade permission form? That was weird.
That's the part that really makes you wonder, right? Is Fudge just being super cautious, or is there something more going on? Is he hiding information, maybe to protect Harry, or maybe for some other less noble reason? It's a real mystery.
And all this secrecy, these restrictions, they really contribute to the feeling of, I don't know, like everyone's on edge, waiting for something bad to happen.
That sense of confinement is definitely a big theme here. Harry's physically free from the Dursleys, but now he's trapped by all this fear and uncertainty.
And that fear seems to be coming from Azkaban itself. Stan's reaction to even mentioning the prison and those Dementor guards, it doesn't paint a very pretty picture.
Azkaban represents the ultimate punishment in the wizarding world. It's a place of complete despair and hopelessness, the total opposite of the wonder and magic of Hogwarts. And the fact that Black was able to escape from such a heavily guarded prison, well, it just makes him seem even more dangerous.
So here we have Harry, this young wizard who's already faced incredible danger, and now he's caught in the middle of this growing crisis. Secrets, lies, potential threats. It's like the walls are closing in.
Absolutely. And as we go deeper into the book, it's really important to keep all this in mind. How will Harry cope with this new sense of vulnerability? What secrets are hiding beneath the surface? There's so much more to uncover.
What really stands out to you from this chapter so far?
Well, I think what's so fascinating is how this chapter sets the stage for the emotional and psychological challenges that Harry's going to face throughout the book. It's a turning point where he realizes that the wizarding world, even with all its magic, can be a pretty dark and dangerous place.
He's right in the thick of it.
He is, isn't he? And it's interesting, it's like he's gone from this confined, restrictive environment with the Dursleys straight into another one. This time it's the Ministry, with all their control over his movements.
Oh, that's a good point. It's a different kind of confinement, right?
Yeah.
The Dursleys kept him physically trapped, but now it's like with Sirius Black on the loose, the Ministry's imposing all these limitations on him.
Exactly. And both situations leave him feeling powerless, trapped, which really adds to his emotional turmoil, I think. And, this chapter really lays the groundwork for those themes of freedom versus control that we see throughout the whole book.
It makes you wonder about Fudge's motives, too, right?
Huh?
I mean, is he really acting in Harry's best interest, or is there something else going on?
That's one of the biggest questions this chapter raises, I think. On the surface, it looks like Fudge is worried about Harry's safety. But then you look at his actions, especially him refusing to explain anything or give Harry any real choices, and it makes you think there might be a hidden agenda there.
It's like he's treating Harry like a pawn in some bigger game.
I think that's a great way to put it. And this whole atmosphere of secrecy and manipulation just adds to the feeling of paranoia that's hanging over the wizarding world.
Yeah. It's like everyone's afraid to say what they really think, afraid to question authority. Even something as simple as going to Hogsmeade for a butterbeer suddenly feels risky.
And that restricted environment just makes Harry's feelings of isolation and vulnerability even worse. He's surrounded by people, but he's still so alone,
Yeah.
unable to really trust anyone or talk about what he's going through.
And speaking of fear, that description Stan gives of Azkaban and the Dementors, well, that's got to be one of the creepiest things I've ever read.
Oh, it's definitely one of the most vivid and disturbing parts of the whole series. The Dementors, they're just ugh, so unsettling with their ability to suck away all happiness and hope. It's like they represent a whole different kind of threat than Voldemort. It's more like uh, despair, psychological torture, the kind of thing that even magic can't really fight.
And the fact that Black escaped from a prison guarded by those things, it makes him seem almost superhuman, like nothing can stop him.
Absolutely. It shows how cunning he is, how desperate. And remember, he's not just trying to avoid punishment. He's driven by this fanatical devotion to Voldemort, this desire to see him back in power.
Which brings us back to why Harry's so convinced that Black is after him.
And it's not just paranoia, When Stan's talking about Black's past, he mentions this really important detail. Black believed he was going to be Voldemort's, right-hand man, and after Voldemort disappeared, he went after the people who'd opposed him.
So in Black's messed up mind, Harry, the boy who lived, the one who defeated Voldemort, he represents the biggest threat to his master's return.
Exactly. It's not just about Harry being a target. It's about him being a symbol. For Black, Harry represents everything that stood in Voldemort's way. Getting rid of him would be a huge symbolic victory.
Yeah.
Like clearing the path for Voldemort to come back.
And that actually connects to something else that's interesting about this chapter. It kind of foreshadows the whole theme of prophecy and destiny that becomes so important in the later books, right? It's like Harry's fate is tied to Voldemort's, whether he likes it or not.
Ah, that's such a great point. This chapter subtly introduces that idea that maybe Harry doesn't have as much control over his own life as he thought. There are all these forces, both good and bad, pulling him in different directions. And how he responds to those forces, well, that's what's going to shape his path.
So we have Harry facing this threat that's both personal and symbolic, stuck in a world that feels more and more suspicious and restrictive. And then there's Fudge, this powerful figure who's holding all the cards but not showing them.
Fudge's role in this chapter is so key. It introduces this whole element of political intrigue and moral ambiguity that we haven't really seen before in the series. Is he a decent guy who's trying to protect Harry from something he doesn't fully understand? Or is he just a politician who's willing to use Harry to further his own goals?
It's a question that really sticks with you, right?
Right.
I keep finding myself trying to figure out Fudge's real motives, what's behind his words and actions.
I think that's what makes J.K. Rowling such a brilliant writer. She doesn't give us easy answers. Instead, she gives us these puzzles, these contradictions, and it makes us think harder, engage with the story on a deeper level, and question everything.
And she does it so well in this chapter. It's not just about what happens, it's about these deeper layers of meaning, the way they connect to the big themes of the book, and even to our own lives. It's interesting, isn't it? This whole chapter really shows us both sides of the wizarding world. Like you have the wonder and the magic of the night bus, but then you also get this glimpse of, well, pure darkness and despair in places like Azkaban.
It's that contrast that makes this world so complex and so fascinating, right? It's not all sunshine and butterbeer, like you said. There are very real dangers, real consequences, and real fear. And for Harry, I think that's becoming more and more clear.
Yeah, it's like he's starting to realize that even magic can't solve everything, that it can't protect him from every threat.
Exactly. He's coming to terms with the fact that the wizarding world, for all its enchantment and wonder, it's still a reflection of the human world, with all its flaws and complexities.
And that brings us back to those restrictions Fudge puts on Harry, right? Confining him to Diagon Alley, refusing to sign that Hogsmeade form. It all seems a bit much, especially since he wasn't punished for the accidental magic.
I know, it definitely makes you question what Fudge is really up to. Is he truly worried about Harry's safety, or is he trying to control him, maybe keep him from learning something that could, threaten the Ministry's power?
It's almost like he's keeping Harry in this little bubble, isolated from the rest of the wizarding world. And doesn't that just add to his fear and anxiety?
Oh, absolutely. It creates this atmosphere of paranoia where Harry starts to question everyone and everything around him. He's surrounded by people, but deep down, he's completely alone.
And it's not like he can talk to anyone about it either, right? About his fears, about seeing the Grim, about his suspicions about Sirius Black. He can't even tell Ron and Hermione.
That lack of support, it's so crucial to understanding what Harry's going through emotionally in this chapter. I mean, here he is carrying this huge burden, this fear of being hunted by this dangerous criminal, and he has absolutely no one to share it with.
It's a lot for anyone to deal with, let alone a teenager who's already been through so much.
Yeah.
And yet, even with all that, he still shows incredible resilience. He's resourceful, he wants to find out the truth, and he doesn't shy away from facing his fears.
That's what makes Harry such a great character, He's not perfect, he makes mistakes, but he never gives up. He keeps pushing himself to be better, to do the right thing, even when it's scary.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the Night Bus, I want to leave you with this question. How do you think what happens in this chapter will shape Harry's journey as we go forward in the book?
Exactly. Will he be able to overcome the fear and isolation that's closing in on him? Will he break free from all those restrictions?
And maybe the biggest question of all, will he uncover the truth about Sirius Black and what role Black has to play in all of this?
Those are the questions that are going to keep us hooked, I think, as we continue exploring Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. Keep those questions in mind as you move on to the next chapter.
Because something tells me the answers are going to be a lot more complicated and a lot more surprising than we expect.
Oh.
Thanks for joining us for another deep dive. We'll see you next time.